Well, President Obama's speech is also fodder for water cooler chats among the business leaders gathered in Davos, Switzerland. Erik has more from the mountains. Erik.
Deirdre, our guest right now, has been having some of those water cooler conversations already. He's Jim Turley, the CEO of accounting firm Ernst Young. Jim, you were just telling me moments ago that, in fact, you have been talking with some fellow business leaders here in Davos at the World Economic Forum about the president's State of the Union speech. We heard a bit from our reporters on the lack of specificity. Was there enough meat on the bone for you guys?
Well, I think that's one of the messages you're hearing here is it sounded very good. And I think the tone was excellent. When you think about the tone of bipartisan cooperation, the tone of real global cooperation, very positive. I thought the discussion around the competitive importance of the corporate tax rates, very positive comment. The competitive issue around trade and how important it is to really be engaged in global trade. These are all positive, but there is a sense that the specifics are going to have to come relatively quickly.
Okay, so trade and taxes, you like that part. Does that constitute enough of an extension of the olive branch to business in your mind, or is the lack of focus, or at least the lack of specificity on the deficit and no mention at all of tackling the problems of Medicare and Social Security a sign that maybe this is still the same president we saw the first 2 years of his term?
Well, I have the opportunity to work with the president on his export council, and so I know how committed the president is to doubling exports. I think the action they've made on the Korean Free Trade Agreement, very positive. We're looking for more action on Colombia and Panama and a whole Trans-Pacific trade deal. So I think the more you see, the better you feel about it. I think the engagement is sincere.
Okay, we're talking to Jim Turley. He's the chairman and CEO of accounting firm Ernst Young, reacting to the president's State of the Union address last night. Jim, we were talking about some of the points that the president laid out, and we heard again about simplification of the tax code, specifically as it concerns businesses. You know, it just occurs to me, though, that if the president and others who support this effort are successful in simplifying the tax code, it could very well mean less revenue for accounting firms like Ernst Young. Would you fight it?
No, we wouldn't fight it at all. I think that making sure that the U.S. tax code is simplified, but is also globally competitive, is a really important step. And so we would be very supportive of that, and we would adjust as need be, but it's really important to be globally competitive.
Jim, I have to ask you a question about your firm in particular, but it relates to the importance of accounting. Here we are at the Global Economic Forum. People are talking about competitiveness. There's a general awareness that the United States needs to raise its level of competitiveness. The president talked about it last night. Financial statements, key in that regard. You know as well as I know, you guys are fighting a lawsuit by Andrew Cuomo, the New York Attorney General. I'm not going to ask you to go into specifics of the suit because that's for your lawyers to argue.
Right.
But how could you allow your people to approve a transaction like Repo 105? You've seen the same evidence, I should say, that I have. It doesn't look very good. How do you feel about it?
Well, you know, I think it's important to put Lehman's failure into context. I mean, it was a result of a global financial meltdown, huge mortgage defaults, asset values falling, liquidity crisis, and it wasn't just Lehman. There would have been numbers of financial institutions filing Chapter 11, if not for the actions of governments, both in the U.S. and globally. I think it's clear, though, that reform of the systems was needed. And we've seen, since Lehman failed, a lot of changes in financial reporting standards, disclosure standards, SEC standards around MD&A. And so we're quite confident that Lehman both complied with accounting standards, and that's what the investigations have said, and also we're disclosing properly.
Okay, guilty or not, though, you can't be proud of Repo 105, can you?
We are not pleased to be in the spotlight like this, and it's something that we will deal with.
And what do you say to your clients who look at that complaint and wonder about the level of oversight that they're getting from Ernst Young? What do you tell them when they ask you questions?
Well, we actually just educate them with the facts that the Repo 105s were accounted for as they were because that's what U.S. GAAP required. Interestingly,
required or allowed?
Well, both. And if you look at IFRS, it had a different accounting answer. And in fact, the Lehman accounts under IFRS were appropriately stated, as were the ones under U.S. GAAP. I think it's important there be a lot more disclosure, and that's what is coming out of both the SEC changes and the changes from the standard setters.
Well, it's good to hear you're supportive of that, Jim. Very good of you to join us here at the World Economic Forum. Take questions on the State of the Union and, of course, this big case that Andrew Cuomo is pressing against your firm. Jim Turley, the CEO of Ernst Young.